Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's session. We're going to be looking at the congregational prayer. Now, this lesson I want everybody to focus because it does get a bit complex and we really need to think about certain things regarding the congregational prayer. So first of all, we're going to deviate a bit from the order of the book. We're going to cover everything in the book, but we're going to mention some things before and they come later in the book, and then we're going to go through the text of the author later on as well. So the congregational prayer is a very important prayer. It's the virtue of that is 25 times more than if prayed alone. So if you pray one prayer in your house, and then if somebody else was to pray the same prayer in the mosque, he would get 25 times more reward than you. So you can add that up in the whole day. You've only got 5. You've prayed 5 prayers at home, and somebody who's prayed all 5 in congregation, that's 125 prayers he's done over you. So it's of great virtue. It's one of the hallmarks of the Muslims, right? One of the greatest hallmarks of a Muslim is, or of a Muslim community, is the establishment of the congregational prayer. And there's many reasons for why we do the congregational prayer. The least that can be said is it fosters brotherhood and unity, and it puts you in a position where you know what's happening in your community. Nobody is no longer a stranger with anybody else. They know what's happening in the community. That's why it's better for you to pray in a mosque that's closer to your house as opposed to a distant mosque. Even if that mosque is more beautiful or more bigger, you pray in your own local community mosque because that gives you a better understanding of what's happening in your own community, and you know the needs of your own community as well. The importance of this prayer is so great that the ulama debate whether it's a wajib or it's a highly emphasized sunnah, and it sits somewhere in between. It's a very, very strong sunnah to go to the mosque and to pray. Men must respond to the call of prayer and head to the mosque. So if you hear the adhan, in the first instance you leave off whatever you're doing. Even if you're reading the Quran or making adhkar, you stop for a second and you respond to the call. It's a form of worship in itself. And then you leave off your trade and your job, and then you head to the mosque, and then you pray, and then you come back and resume your duties. If for some reason you cannot pray in the mosque, then it's better for you to pray in a congregation where you are. So instead of praying alone, you find one person with you and then you make a congregation. If you're going to be the imam and it's going to be your spouse, then obviously your spouse, there would be a gap between your spouse wouldn't stand next to you, she'd stand behind you. And men must lead men. So first of all, women don't have a congregation prayer. It's prohibitively disliked for women to lead women. They pray in their houses separate. And women can dedicate a part of their house, a room or an area that's dedicated as their own prayer musalla, as their place where they make prostration. And there's a great virtue in a woman praying in the depths of her house. But if she were to lead men, if she was to lead, a woman can only lead a woman can't lead a man. And as we mentioned, it's disliked for a woman to lead women. Women do not lead each other in congregation. Men can lead men, and men can lead women. If a man leads a woman, then he needs to attend leading, whereas he doesn't need to intend. If for example, I'm praying and somebody joins my prayer, I didn't intend for somebody to join my prayer. So a child cannot lead men in prayer. So somebody who's not reached the age of discerning does not lead men in prayer. However, the reverse is true. Children can lead children. Healthy man must lead a healthy man. Okay, what the Imam means here is that somebody who doesn't have a chronic excuse. So if somebody's got a chronic excuse, even though he's excused, he may not lead somebody who's healthy in the sense that he doesn't have a chronic excuse. We mentioned chronic excuses are such things like continuous bleeding, releasing of gas, or releasing of urine, incontinence, and such like. Women can lead women, but it's disliked, better for women to pray separate in a designated place of prayer called the mosque in her house. Children can also pray together. The follower must intend to follow the imam. So if I go into a mosque or I'm at work and I'm going to pray the Dhuhr prayer, and I see that somebody else is already praying, and I know he's praying the Dhuhr prayer, then I can intend to follow him, and then I can just join him. I will make us just by standing next to him, he'll know I've joined him, and then he will become the Imam and I will become the follower. As mentioned, the Imam does not have to intend on being an Imam unless when leading women. The follower needs to be behind the Imam, foot needs to be behind. So the Imam needs to be slightly in front. So to make a congregational prayer, you need minimum of 2 people. So you have, say, the Imam, and then you have the follower. The follower at no point stands in front of the Imam, because the Imam is the one who stands in front. If there's one person leading, the Imam stands here and the person doesn't stand here, one prostration length away from the Imam. No, he stands next to the Imam, but he stands ever so slightly back, where his feet, he looks at his feet needs to be a bit behind the Imam. We don't look at the front of the foot because people have different size feet. So we look at the heel, because that's when you stand with your weight on the heel. So you look at the heel of the person. So your heel needs to be a little bit behind the Imam. The prayer of the Imam must be the same prayer or stronger. So what this means is that if I want to pray, say I want to pray if I want to pray the Dhuhr prayer and the Imam is praying the Asr prayer, I can't intend him to be my Imam, because his prayer needs to be the same as my prayer. So if I'm praying an Asr prayer, if I'm praying a Dhuhr prayer, I must know that he's also praying a Dhuhr prayer. So for example, I've got a friend and he's going to make his Dhuhr Salah now, and then I know this, he's told me about this, and then I make wudu 2 minutes later, and then I go to pray and I see he's praying. In this instance, I can join him. If, however, he's praying the Asr prayer, right, he's prayed in the earlier time, he's praying the Asr prayer, I haven't done my Dhuhr yet, and I see him and I think, oh, I want the reward of the congregation, so I'm going to intend a Dhuhr, and he's praying the Asr. No, that doesn't work. The prayers need to match. They need to match each other. Dhuhr for Dhuhr, Asr for Asr, Maghrib for Maghrib. Also, this holds true for Qadha prayers. If I didn't pray the Fajr prayer from yesterday, and my friend didn't pray the Fajr prayer from this morning, so he has got up and he's praying his Fajr Qadha prayer, and then I make an intention and join him, I can't do that because it's a different prayer, right? If he was praying yesterday's prayer and I was also praying yesterday's Qadha prayer, then yes, that's fine. If he's praying today's Qadha and I'm praying yesterday's Qadha and I'm intending him to be the Imam, then that's not going to work. So even your make-up prayers need to be the same. Or a stronger prayer. What do we mean by a stronger prayer? For example, if he's praying a Sunnah and I intend praying Dhuhr, and I see him praying, and I know he's praying Sunnah, and I think, oh, it's okay, he's the Imam, I'm going to get the reward of the congregation if he carries on praying, and I just say Allahu Akbar and I intend the Dhuhr prayer. No, that doesn't work. If, however, the reverse, so he's praying a Fard prayer and I intend Sunnah worship, and I happen to come across him praying, I know he's praying the Fard prayer, but I want to join him in a congregation with the intention of a Sunnah or Nawafil, then I can do that. So the prayers need to match, or the Imam's prayer needs to be stronger than your prayer. Okay, so you can't pray behind someone who's already prayed behind somebody else. So you go into the masjid and somebody joined the congregation late. And the Imam had said the salam because he joined the congregation late. He stood up now to finish off whatever he missed, and then I go and join him. I can't do that because he has already had an Imam. He was someone praying behind an Imam and he's finishing off that prayer, right? So then I can then not make him an Imam because he's finishing off a prayer that already had an Imam. So in this instance, I can't pray behind him. I'll have to pray on my own. Okay, so the Imam stands in front and the first person stands to the right. So we mentioned this. So this is the Imam standing. Then if I join the Imam, I will stand here slightly back towards his right. Not towards his left, I'll stand towards his right. Now if somebody else were to come and join us in prayer, that second person, if he doesn't know what he's doing, would come and stand next to me, right? Or he would stand on the left-hand side of the Imam. In this instance, what the Imam should do is motion to them to get back. The Imam would make a motion that would make the two people that are standing on either side of the Imam or on the right side of the Imam, he would motion to them to get back, and then they would move back a saf, they would move back an aisle, and then they would pray. Sometimes people don't know this, right? So you have to do this. Because normally an Imam prays right at the front. If an Imam is praying right at the front, the Imam will not have the opportunity to move forward. So the Imam does this. If, however, the Imam does this and the congregation don't understand what's going on, then the Imam can move forward. But it's better for the Imam to motion to them, because they are the followers of the Imam. The Imam is the leader, and the Imam should be firm where he is, and then the people should basically move back and get into line. So now the people have got behind. Normally what happens is if somebody knows what he's doing, is he will go and tap on the person's shoulder and say, hey, I want to join you in prayer, may you step back. The person will step back. Okay, so what happens now that you've got the Imam here and you've got two people joining, they've stepped back and the rows start to build. So naturally what will happen is people will start to come. People will start to come from both sides. Now you have to keep the Imam in the middle. So you start from the right side and you start to build the row, and then you balance it. So if somebody comes, he sees where the Imam is and he balances, either on the right, either on the left, either on the right, and then you keep building. If there's any gaps, so let's say there's a whole line of people here, but there's a gap left 4 places on the right or 4 places on the left, and some others have come behind and they've made a second row. If they've made a second row, then in this instance you don't join the second row, you have to fill in the gaps. You have to still make sure that you fill in the gaps, unless they've gone down into ruku and you fear that you're going to miss the rak'ah, the first cycle, or the second cycle, then you join wherever you are, whether it's in the first or the second. But it's always best in the first instance to fill up any of the gaps in any out, because sometimes people don't realize they leave gaps behind, and then if you know better, you come and then you fill the gaps. If a man leads his wife, then she should be behind him. Women do not stand next to men, they stay one saf behind. In a mosque, if there are women and children, then children get in a row in the middle. So you're in a mosque, and in a mosque, if it's going to be a mixed gathering here means that the men sit on one side and obviously the women will be sitting back towards the back. And this is like normally when you have Islamic lectures in a mosque where you don't have halls or the like to hire, and then you give them in a mosque, or you have some mosques have dhikr sessions and then you have like a veil, like a curtain, and then the women are behind the curtain, and there's children running around. There's children running around on both sides, right, amongst the men and amongst the women. When this happens and there's a lot of children, the first row is the man's row, then you put the children in the second row, and then you put the women behind in the third row. If you can't do this, then you disperse the children between the men, right? So each father is responsible for their children. If there are only a few children, then or if there's like, say, one particular role is like 30 people and then you only have 10 children, you're going to leave 2/3 of the role empty. And again, in this case, you make sure that the children stand with you in the front. So to fill in all the gaps, not to leave gaps. And this doesn't mean that there's a tiny space and then you force your way in, forcing the congregation to become uncomfortable and making people turn towards the left or the right and disrupting their prayer. There's bound to be slight gaps between the congregation, and that's not a problem. Obviously, you should try to make sure that the rows are beautifully laid out, but it doesn't mean that you try to squeeze yourself in and cause huge disruption to everybody else around you. But generally, if there's a space where a human being can get in, then you go and fill the gap. You can move to fill gaps. So if a gap appears, somebody breaks their wudu and has to leave, or something happens, or somehow they've readjusted their rows and a space appears up, an opening appears in front of you, then by all means you can step forward and you can join the row in front. It's not a problem. You can step kind of slightly this way and slightly that way, or in front of you. And sometimes you may end up walking from one aisle, another row opens. You move forward, you move forward. The general idea is that all the rows stay filled, and generally the closer you are to the Imam, the more rewardful your prayer is, right? And the reward becomes less and less as the rows build up. So there's no aversion to joining rows, as sometimes you see. People will leave deliberately. They leave gaps. Gaps appear and then they leave the gaps. And this causes two problems. The first problem is that you've left the gaps. You can move forward and then fill the gap, fill the gap, fill the gap if you have to move some spaces forward. Keep filling the gaps. Second thing is, especially in some countries where the mosques are small, the non-Muslim countries, and even in Muslim countries, on a Friday, the mosques overflow. People end up praying in the street. If it's going to be in a Middle Eastern country, they're going to be praying at the hottest time of the day in 45-degree temperatures only because inside the mosque people refuse to close up the rows. And in Western countries where the mosques are smaller, again, people end up praying on the streets because there are spaces inside, but people haven't filled in the rows. And then those poor guys have to pray outside on the street. And obviously in Western countries, it could be snow. More often than not, it's rain, right? So it causes hardship, unnecessary hardship, because people don't want to fill in the rows. If a man comes and there is nobody to stand next to them, wait until someone comes if there is no fear of missing an action. Okay, so this is that if I go into say I go into a mosque and there's a congregation has already started, the first line has become totally full. Now I'm not supposed to pray on my own, right? So in this instance, what do? I tap somebody on the shoulder and indicating to him that please step back, I want to join you in congregation. He steps back, now there's two people, and that's the saf started, we've joined the congregation. And the people in the front will end up obviously readjusting, and then they'll close the aisle up again. But however, in today's age, it could cause problems if you do that. Most people don't understand when you tap them on the shoulder of what's really happening. So they won't really step back. And in this instance, what do? You basically wait, because somebody else might also be late and join you in prayer. So wait around a bit. If there's no fear that you're going to miss a major action of the prayer. So what are we talking about? If somebody goes into bowing, right? Then you've missed a major action of standing. Or if somebody's in bowing and then they stand up again, you've missed a major action, right? So in this instance, if you are going to miss a major action, then you join the congregation even as one person in that row. But if there's no fear of missing a particular action of prayer, then wait a bit, somebody may come and then you can join them and then say Allahu Akbar and then carry on with your prayer. Within the group prayer, it is wajib to follow the Imam. Okay, so the Imam needs to be followed. We do not go ahead of the Imam. We do not deliberately miss actions for the sake of, because you're reciting something and you haven't caught up with the Imam needs to be followed. It's wajib for you to follow the Imam in every single action he does. Now let's break this down and have a look in a bit more detail. The only time you don't follow the Imam is if you're doing a wajib action like the tashahhud. So every action that the Imam does, you follow. So if the Imam goes down into the bowing position, right, you, as the follower of the Imam, you don't need to recite anything anyway, right? You don't need to recite anything anyway. So if the Imam goes down, you go down with him. Then when you recite Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, if you don't finish reciting this and then the Imam stands up, what you're reciting is a sunnah. What is obligatory upon you, what's wajib upon you, is to follow the Imam, necessary upon you. So then if the Imam gets up, you stop reciting and you stand up with the Imam again. Then Samiyallahu liman hamida Rabbana wa lakal hamd. If he says this and you don't get to say this, and he goes down into bowing, you don't say it. You go down into bowing because your job is to follow the Imam. So in every action you follow the Imam. The only action that you don't follow the Imam and you complete before you follow the Imam is the tashahhud, because it's wajib, and it's wajib to recite it completely. So if the Imam has recited it and the Imam gets up, if either you join late or you're reciting slower than the Imam. In this instance, you finish off your recitation and then stand up and then join the Imam. Every other action you follow the Imam. The qunut of the witr prayer also, the dua in the witr prayer in congregation during Ramadan, because that's the only time you do this prayer in congregation, it's wajib. But the specific words that we utter, the dua that most people utter, Allahumma inni nasta'inuka, this dua, it's sunnah, this particular dua. So again, you follow the Imam, but because the dua is a wajib, as long as you've got some of the dua in, and then that's fine. You've discharged your duty, and then you follow the Imam. Okay? So even when it comes to the wajib of the witr prayer. Okay, so catching the prayer late, you need to make up what is missed. Now this gets a bit technical, so we need to concentrate and focus here. And then after this, we'll have a look at what the author has to say. So George goes to the masjid, he goes in late. Now the Imam has prayed, it's a 4-cycle prayer or it's a 2-cycle prayer. The Imam has done his bowing and done his prostrations, and the Imam has stood up. First of all, what we need to know is, where do you catch? Where have you missed a cycle and where have you caught the cycle? If the Imam goes into a bowing position, and if you can catch the bowing position, right? So you've said Allahu Akbar, you've waited a bit and said Allahu Akbar and gone down again. First of all, you cannot say Allahu Akbar and with one movement move down, right? You can't say Allahu Akbar and then move down. That's an invalid prayer. You've not done the opening tahrima. You need to have said Allahu Akbar, either gone like this momentarily and then gone down. You need to have one action that separates the tahrima from your second action, which is bowing down. So you basically then say a second Allahu Akbar and then bend down with the Imam. As long as you catch the Imam when he's down in this position, you've caught the entire cycle that you missed. The standing up and then the qiyam, whatever the Imam was reciting, you've missed it all, but as long as you've come to the mosque and he's here and you've joined him, you've caught everything. So there's not a problem now. Okay, so then you carry on praying, whether it's a 2-cycle, 3-cycle or 4-cycle, you say your salams with him at the end and your prayer is done. If, however, you miss it, so he's gone down and stood up again, now you come to the masjid and you join the prayer. In this instance, you've missed the first cycle, right? So you carry on praying with him, whether it's a 2-cycle, 3-cycle, 4-cycle, once he finishes. Or you come into the mosque and he's sitting down. He's done his first prostration or second prostration. At any point past this action, you've missed the cycle. So once the Imam has finished his salams, you then basically stand up. You stand up and now you need to make that one cycle. So if it was a 4-cycle prayer, you've prayed 3 cycles with him now, but you missed your first cycle. So once you stand up now, you're going to restart like it's your first cycle. So you're going to say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, followed by a surah. Even though you've prayed 3 cycles and you're standing up to make up 1 cycle, it's your first missed cycle, but in the way that you've prayed with him, it's like you're praying a 4th cycle basically. And a 4th cycle doesn't entail that you do the surah. But that was the 4th cycle for everybody else. You've missed it. You've missed your first cycle. So when you stand, you basically stand as if you were reading your missed cycle. So then you would read everything and then you would sit down and then say your salams. Okay, that's not too complicated because that was missing only 1 cycle in a 4-cycle prayer. So now let's move on to missing 2 cycles. So what's happened is the Imam has done his first cycle, is bowed, prostrated, stood up for his second cycle. If you catch him there, right? If you catch him there, then that's 1 cycle missed. If you, again, he does that and you come in at any point after this and he's sitting down for his second cycle, you have caught him in his second cycle. When he stands up for his third cycle, you've only basically prayed, you've joined him in his third and his 4th cycle. So you now have 2 cycles to make up. So once he says his salam, you need to get up and you need to make your 3rd cycle and your 4th cycle, but you missed the 1st and 2nd cycle. So what you do now is you read as if you missed the 1st. So you would read again, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Surah Fatiha, followed by a surah. You go down into prostration, then you get up for your 4th and final cycle, but because you missed the 2nd cycle also, then you would read again like it was the 2nd cycle, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Surah Fatiha, followed by a 2nd surah. Okay? And then you sit down and then you do your salams. So now, if you've missed 3 cycles, what would you do? So he's got up for his 2nd cycle, the Imam sat down, he got up for his 3rd cycle, the Imam has now gone down for his 3rd prostrations, he's got up, it's the last cycle now, you've joined him in the last cycle, right? So this is the last cycle. So when he goes down now for his bowing and prostration, he is not going to get up again because this is his cycle's done. He's sitting, he's going to do his salams. If you've caught him in the 3rd cycle, so again you need to make up 3 cycles. So then you would make up starting from the beginning, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and then followed by a surah. That's your 1st cycle. Then, if you, depending on where you caught him, if you've you've sat once, right? You've sat once. If it's a third cycle, you caught him in the third cycle, you've sat down once now. You went down and you got up. So it's a cycle you've done. So now that you've caught him in the fourth, you caught him, you made up your first cycle. When you sit down as if it was your second, because you've done one now. You've done one, you sit down now, and then that's your second cycle. Then when you stand up, what did you miss? You missed your second cycle in reality. Then you read it as if it's your second cycle. And then again you sit down and then stand up, and then the fourth cycle will be then the same. It's a bit complicated. Well, believe me, once you're in the mosque and you see people do this, it becomes straightforward. It's not straightforward to explain without actually showing it in practice. And sometimes you don't think about it, right? As much as you don't need to think about it as much as the way I'm explaining it. It's easier to just fit into the actions and actually doing it fits into place. Then if you've caught him right at the end of the fourth cycle, so this is the last tashahhud, and the Imam is going to say salam, or a 4-cycle prayer. Or it's a 2-cycle prayer. So you have not prayed anything with him. So then when you get up, if it's a 2-cycle prayer, what did you miss 2 cycles? So you get up, start from A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitan Rajim, Bismillah Rahman Rahim, read Fatiha with the surah, go down, come up, it's your second cycle, read the second cycle. So if it's a 4-cycle prayer now, and you've missed everything, so you just sat on the last cycle, you just sat on the last cycle and you missed everything, so you're just sitting for the tashahhud and then the salawat upon Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam and then just the salams, right? In this case, you need to make up everything. So you've caught nothing. So even though you've joined the prayer, you stand up now and do your first cycle, which is reciting everything again, sitting down, standing up, reciting the second cycle, sitting down, staying tashahhud, then stand up for the third and the fourth cycles. And inshallah, with a bit of practice, it becomes straightforward, and it's something that people do regularly if they're late for the mosques, and it is something that they will end up understanding. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at what the Imam has to say. Praying the Fard prayer in congregation carries 25 times more reward than praying it alone. Hence, if the congregation commences after one has already begun praying the Fard prayer alone, he should break his prayer by saying salam once, even if while standing, and then proceed to join the congregation. This ruling applies to Fajr or Maghrib, whether or not one has performed the first prostration, and to the 4-unit prayer only if he has not yet performed the first prostration. So I made a chart after this slide that will make this easy to understand. If he has already performed the first prostration in a 4-unit prayer, he should add it to the second unit, such that it becomes a 2-unit nafil prayer, and then proceed to join the congregation. If has performed 3 of the 4 units, he should complete the 4 units and then join the congregation with the intention of performing a nafil, except for the asr prayer. So here's a chart to break down what the Imam just mentioned. So if you're praying the Fajr prayer or the Maghrib prayer, and the Imam starts. So I'm in the masjid and I'm praying my Fajr prayer, and then the Imam starts the Fajr prayer. Or I'm praying the Maghrib prayer, and then the Imam starts his Maghrib prayer in congregation. What do I do? In this instance, I break the prayer even with 1 salam, even if standing. So I've started to pray now, it's commenced, I give 1 salam, I break the prayer, and I join the congregation. If I've gone down into prostration and come up, it's the start of my second cycle. As long as I'm standing, I can again say the salam and go and join the congregation. However, if I am in the second cycle sitting down, so it's the first sitting in a 2-cycle prayer, in a 3-cycle prayer, the first sitting. Once I've got down to here, then I finish my prayer. So break the prayer with 1 salam even if standing. If second set of prostration has been done, then to complete the prayer. So in this instance, you complete the prayer, the Fajr prayer and the Maghrib prayer. I finish it as normal, and I may not join the congregational prayer because I finished my prayer by myself. So breaking a 4-cycle prayer. So now it comes down to the other prayers, the 4-cycle prayers. What do we do in a 4-cycle prayer? So you break the prayer with a salam if not perform the first prostration. So if you've not gone down for the first prostration only this time, right? If you've not gone down to the first prostration, you do your salam and you break the prayer and you join the congregation. If however you've gone down into your prostration for the first cycle now, right? In that instance, when you stand up, if the Imam has commenced the prayer, you basically carry on praying, make it a 2-cycle prayer, make it a voluntary, it's like a nafil prayer now, and then you say your salams and then you get up and then you join the congregation. Okay, so the difference here is that if it's a 4-cycle prayer and you've gone down for your first set of prostration, right, and then in that instance you complete your prayer, say your salams and join the congregations. If only standing for the 3rd cycle, then break with 1 salam. Say I'm praying, say the Asr prayer. So I've made the 1st cycle, I stood up, I made the 2nd cycle, did the tashahhud, and I stood up for the 3rd cycle. So now I'm in the 3rd cycle. In this instance, if the Imam commences the prayer, I'm standing in my 3rd cycle. I can break my prayer by giving a salam and joining the congregation. But if, however, I've done the prostration for the 3rd cycle, right, and then I've stood up for the 4th cycle now, in this instance I wouldn't do the salam, I would just finish the prayer and then go and join the congregation as a voluntary prayer. Unless it was the Asr prayer, because you cannot join the Asr, you wouldn't, because it's prohibitively disliked for you to pray anything after the Asr prayer. So if completed 3 of the 4 cycles, then should finish the prayer and join congregation with the intention of voluntary prayer, as we just mentioned. If one is praying the Sunnah prayer before Jum'ah or Dhuhr, and the Imam rises to the pulpit or the congregation of Dhuhr commences, he should finish only the first 2 units of the 4-unit Sunnah, unless he has performed the prostration of the 3rd cycle, in which case he completes the entire 4 units of the Sunnah prayer. Right, so the same thing happens here. If it's the Sunnahs of Dhuhr, the same thing happens here. If it's before the first, before the 2nd sitting, right? So you're standing up in the 1st or the 2nd ayah, then the cycle, then you do your salam, and then you go and join the Imam for his Friday prayers. And even if it's a Sunnah for the normal Dhuhr prayer, once you finish, then you come back and then you have to make up that Dhuhr prayer. The only Sunnah prayer that you actually would make up out of these, if this happens, would be the Dhuhr prayer. You wouldn't do this for any other prayer. And obviously the Fajr prayer has its own extra special rules attached to it. You'd pray your Fajr prayer before, we'll talk about that as well. So in this case, if you've gone down into the 3rd, if you're doing your 3rd cycle or 4th cycle, then you would finish your Sunnah prayer and then you join the congregation prayer. If one enters the mosque and the Imam has already begun the congregation of the Fard prayer, he should not pray any Sunnah except for the 2 units before Fajr, as long as he feels that he will still catch the congregation upon finishing it. So as mentioned before, that Fajr has a special ruling. So if I've entered the mosque and I haven't prayed the Sunnah Mu'akkadah of Dhuhr, or haven't prayed the Sunnah of Asr or of Isha Mu'akkadah also, if the Imam starts, I don't pray my Sunnahs, I go and join the Imam. Except for Fajr. In the case of Fajr, I have to pray my Sunnah before, right? If there's no risk of missing the Fajr congregation, then I have to pray my Sunnah first. In a situation like this, it's prohibitively disliked for me to pray in the same row as everybody else. It can also cause confusion, and it kind of entails doing something different than the Jamaat, different than the congregation. You're supposed to be praying with the congregation, and what are you doing? Praying your own prayer in the congregation? No, it's prohibited, disliked. So what the person is supposed to do is, obviously in the first instance, you pray in your house, right? If you happen to go to the mosque and the congregation has started, then you pray in another room if you can. If not, then behind a pillar. And then if not, then you pray right at the back of the mosque, where it's disliked because it shows that you're doing something different from the congregation. So it's always best to hide and pray this prayer. If one misses the 4-unit Sunnah before Dhuhr, he should make it up in the Dhuhr time period before the 2 Sunnahs of Dhuhr. So if you missed the Dhuhr prayer, the Imam has commenced the obligatory prayer for Dhuhr, you come into the mosque, now you don't have a chance to pray the 4 cycles before, the Sunnahs before. You join the congregation, and as we mentioned, for the Dhuhr prayer, you make it up. There's 2 opinions of when you make it up. You can either make it up before the 2 cycles of the the two sunnahs that come after the Dhuhr prayer, or you make it up after. So before or after is not a problem, but as long as it's made in the time of Dhuhr, right? The slightly stronger opinion is that you pray it before the two sunnahs. So you make the fard behind the imam, and then you pray your 4 sunnahs that you missed, and then the 2 sunnah, and then the 2 nawafilah. But however, it needs to be done within the time of Dhuhr. You cannot extend it into the time of Asr and then say, I'm going to make it up. It no longer becomes a sunnah. Then you're just doing 4 cycles of obligatory prayer. One attains the merit of praying in congregation even by catching the final tashahhud of the prayer, but is not considered to be praying with the congregation. One may pray nafil prayers before the fard if one feels secure from missing the congregation of the fard prayer. So this is to do with the oaths and the like, and things like that, about not having been part of the congregation, but having achieved the merit of the congregation. One may pray nafil prayers before the fard if one feels secure from missing the congregation prayer. So you go into the mosque and you know that the time for prayer is going to be in 20 minutes time, and you're early. By all means, pray some nawafilah. Pray until the imam, you know the imam's going to get up and hold the congregation. There's not a problem with that. If one has prayed the fard by himself and then the congregation begins, it is not disliked to leave the mosque except for Dhuhr and Isha, in which case he should pray 4 units of nafil with the congregation. So someone enters the mosque and he doesn't realize people are sitting around. He thinks they've done the congregation. He makes the fard prayer by himself. If it's the fajr prayer or the asr prayer, then obviously once the imam starts to make up his prayer, there's no prayer after the fajr prayer and there's no prayer after the asr prayer. So there's no harm in you leaving the mosque. In this instance, you can leave the mosque. However, unless it's the Dhuhr prayer or the Isha prayer, in this instance, once you hear the Iqamah for the Iqamat Salah, you join the prayer, because it's disliked for you not to join the prayer once you hear the call to prayer. And then you pray with the intention of a Nawafil prayer. However, if you have an excuse, you can leave the mosque. And in this case, an excuse would be if you were an imam for a secondary mosque. So if you are an imam for the mosque down the road and you need to get there to lead the prayer, then you would go there, because it would cause confusion in that mosque. Where's the imam vanished? And it could cause people to leave the mosque and not having prayed in congregation, but having prayed by themselves. And also, if you're a teacher and you need to be with your students, you need to be with your students, teaching them now, then again you would go and be with them and then pray in congregation with them. Most study circles used to be held in mosques, and that would entail that you're going to another mosque or a madrasa where you'd also pray. It is disliked to leave the mosque in which the adhan has been performed before praying, except for a valid excuse we just mentioned. One is not permitted to pray the same prayer twice. It's prohibitively disliked. So if you think you've made some slight errors, you've missed some sunnahs out, you've done something in the prayer that you're not comfortable with, as long as you haven't broken necessary action, right? And even necessary actions can be rectified, as we'll mention in the next chapter. If a necessary action has been broken and it's not been rectified within the prayer, then yes, you'd redo the prayer again, because your prayer is not sound, it's deficient. If, however, you've done a prayer and now you're thinking, I didn't do this, I missed out Bismillah, I missed out the ta'awudh, I missed out something else of the sunnahs, then no, you would not repeat that prayer thinking I'm going to get extra reward. No, you don't. It's done, it's done. That's what the sunnah prayers are for. The nawafil, the extra prayers are there to make up for deficiencies in your main prayer. If one joins the congregation while the imam is in ruku and remains standing until the imam raises his head, then he has not caught that unit of prayer. If the imam goes into ruku, right, I come in, I should join, and then I've caught. But if I wait thinking, okay, he's going to stand and then I'm going to catch him and then I'm going to go down, you haven't caught that cycle. If a follower performs the ruku before the imam, after the imam has recited the minimum fard, by which a unit is valid. So here, what the imam is saying is that there's a minimum recitation. We mentioned the obligatory recitation. So if you join the prayer with the imam, for some reason, the minute you join, you know he's going to bow after he's led the recitation, and you decide to bow before. And you keep bowing, and at some point the imam is going to catch you. But if the minimum recitation has not been done by the imam, right, which is the smallest ayah in the Quran, thumma nadar, or another ayah, or the minimum recitation has not been done, then in this case If you went down before him and you stayed like that, you have not caught his cycle, right? So you've totally missed everything, and then there's no prayer for you. You need to pray it again. If that happens, that minimum happens, and then you go down, and then he comes down and joins you, then that's caught it. Now this seems like a strange case, but we draw lessons from this, right? It's the Imam, you come to the end of the prayer or something, he comes to the end of his recitation, and then you join, and then you don't realize what's happened, and then you either stand up again, he goes down, you go down, or you stay, you're down, and then he catches you, and then you stand up together, or he catches you, you stand up, got confused, and then went back down again, but as long as he got up and then you got up with him. So there's many scenarios that can happen. This is basically the general guide. It's very rare something like this it's like almost impossible for something like this to have happened, but it's there to draw lessons from if something similar happens in a situation with you. If one has prayed the fard by himself and then the congregation begins, it is not disliked to leave the mosque except for Dhuhr and Isha, in which case you should pray 4 units of nafil with the congregation. This has been mentioned before. It's disliked to leave a mosque in which the adhan has been performed before praying without a valid excuse. So once you hear the adhan, we mentioned before that the idea is that you respond to the adhan, right? So if you're at home, you respond to the adhan, however you respond. If you're in the mosque, it's disliked for you. The adhan has happened. If you happen to be in the mosque, even if you've prayed, then as long as it's not the 2 prayers that we mentioned, then join the congregation, make it a nafil prayer upon yourself. And here, also, if you heard the adhan and you have to leave the mosque, so you've heard the adhan now, the time for prayer has started, maybe they're going to pray in 20 minutes, you've heard the adhan go, it's disliked for you to leave the mosque thinking, okay, I've got time, I'm going to pray in an hour or two's time. It's disliked to do that. Make your prayer, if you've got an excuse, make your prayer in the mosque, your 4 cycles of your obligatory prayer, 2 cycles of obligatory prayer, and then you can go if you've got an excuse, even if you don't join the Imam. But the idea is that it's disliked for you to have entered the mosque, heard the call to prayer, and then left without praying something. One is not permitted to pray the same prayer twice. If one joins a congregation while the Imam is in ruku, these are my notes that I've just carried over. So thank you very much. That's all for today. Now, some of these things did seem a bit technical, but however, trust me, if you are a regular prayer and you've seen these things done a few times, they become like second nature. So it's always good to sit down and go through these notes again and ask each other questions and see if you've got it right. You can go to the mosque and ask the Imam also. Say, what do I do in a 4-cycle prayer if I've missed a first cycle, if I've missed a second cycle, or how, if someone's if an obligatory prayer has started and I've entered late, at what point can I break my sunnah prayer if I'm praying a sunnah prayer, or what sunnahs can I pray or not pray? Very soon you'll understand. It becomes natural, it becomes second nature, because prayer is a part of us, right? It becomes imbibed into our blood. It's something that a mu'min cannot live without. It's like a paradigm, and his whole life is around that paradigm of prayer. It's around that skeleton, that structure. It's like the day is pegged, his whole day is pegged on the prayer. 1 peg at Fajr, and then various pegs throughout the day, and then it ends at Isha, and that is his day. So because prayer becomes a part of who you are, these things also become a part of who you are. So they become very easy to understand and master, and to be able to do them without actually having to think about them. So inshallah, may Allah all give us the himmah, the ability, the intelligence to understand all of this, and to be able to discharge our duties perfectly without any hindrance, and to make us of those who offer our prayers, who are called abids and sajids. وصلى الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.